Man, the month of Metroid really has been a doozy so far, hasn't it? I mean, hell, I've looked at the original Metroid already, and the original Metroid. Wait, I've only reviewed one game. Well, time to change that. The next game I'm going to be looking at for the month of Metroid is Metroid Prime. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the game itself, I thought it was important to go learn about the history of the game and how it was born. So, get ready to learn some stuff, I guess.
In 1994, Nintendo released what is considered by many to be the best Metroid game and even the greatest game of all time in Super Metroid on the SNES. Super Metroid was a vast improvement over the previous Metroid games with incredibly refined gameplay and a wonderful atmosphere. The release of the game came and went, and Metroid fans were left wondering when the next game would come out. Little did they know, the next game in the series wouldn't be released until over 8 years later. Samus and company completely skipped the entire life of the N64 because apparently Nintendo didn't know what direction was right for the franchise. Enter Retro Studios, a new, at the time, Texas-based development studio that Nintendo partnered with to develop 5 brand new titles for the soon-to-be-released GameCube. 4 of those previously planned games were soon canceled. The one that remained was Metroid Prime.
Fans were incredibly skeptical about the prospects of a first-person Metroid title. I mean, Retro was a completely untested studio at the time. Could they deliver a faithful Metroid experience? Yeah.
The events of Metroid Prime take place 3 years after Samus' battle on Zebes, which was the locale of the original Metroid. Samus must investigate reports of space pirates on the planet Talon 4 who've escaped from Zebes. On her way there, she loses almost all of her abilities after entering the space pirate ship Orpheon. There's not much to the story at the outset, but Metroid has never really been an extremely story-driven experience in the first place, and while Metroid Prime did have much more in the way of lore, the way it presents this to the player is truly brilliant. Each player essentially can choose whether or not they actually want to learn more about the world of Talon 4 and what the space pirates are up to, because most of the details are actually given through data logs that you can scan using Samus' scan visor, which I'll talk more about later. This really immerses you into the world of Metroid Prime. And while we're on the topic of immersion, the way Prime handles the first-person perspective may very well be the best I've ever seen. It feels as though you're actually seeing through the eyes of Samus rather than being given a full view of your surroundings. The top and the bottom of the screens are actually slightly obscured due to Samus' helmet, with your HUD showing off all the necessary information on screen. There are tons of little touches Retro also added that really didn't need to be there, but amplify the overall experience of the game. The first time you set foot on Talon 4 in the lush Talon overworld, you can look up and notice the raindrops falling on your visor. When there's a bright light, you can see the reflection of Samus' face. And when you shoot certain creatures, their blood will splatter all over you. Those, as well as a ton of other small details, are riddled throughout Metroid Prime, and I honestly wonder why more games that take place in the first-person perspective don't take some cues from this game. And no,
bloody scream! So real.
Doesn't count. I fucking love these immersive qualities in games, and it's part of the reason why I love games like Prime and the Metro series so much.
Like I said, Retro didn't need to add these details, but it just feels like what you would want from the atmospheric world of a Metroid game. Somehow, someway, Retro was able to take everything that made the 2D Metroid games great and translated it into this new 3D world.
As I mentioned in my review of the original Metroid, a defining component of the Metroid series has always been the sense of isolation it evokes on the player. Metroid Prime is no different. Everywhere you go, you feel secluded, with only a bunch of dirty space pirates there to keep you company, as well as the various creatures of Talon 4. The world is also so huge and fully realized, with environments that are all completely different from one another. There's the wet rainforest-like Talon overworld, the desert-like Chozo ruins, the hot, fiery Magmoor caverns, the cold, snow-driven Fendrana drifts, and even more. Traversing this world goes almost completely uninterrupted, and it feels seamless as Metroid Prime has no loading screens whatsoever. Instead, the loading is masked behind doors that don't always open instantly, as well as elevators that let you travel to the different locations. This, once again, adds to the incredible sense of immersion Metroid Prime evokes. The planet of Talon 4 can seem overwhelmingly large at times. Thankfully, Metroid Prime has an incredibly detailed map system that works wonderfully. It also incorporates a new hint system, which tells you, hey, maybe you should go check out this area. But you're still able to explore each world as much as you want. Obviously, though, in the typical Metroid fashion, you won't be able to reach certain areas until you find the right item you need, which is also where the patented backtracking comes into play. The gameplay is true to the series' roots, and although Metroid shifted into the aforementioned first-person perspective, Retro didn't try and create a first-person shooter. Metroid Prime is officially classified by Nintendo as a first-person adventure game. Sure, there's some shooting here and there, but the game is just as much about exploration and discovery, which is something that Retro Studios understood. Throughout the adventure, you'll encounter familiar weapon upgrades like the Wave Beam and the Ice Beam, while also finding new items like the Boost Ball. You can also make use of different visors throughout the game, including the previously mentioned Scan Visor. Using the Scan Visor, you can acquire logs of all the different creatures and bosses in the world that can help you defeat each of them, as well as just get tons of information. The other two visors include the X-Ray Visor and the Thermal Visor, which can be used to get around in dark areas. Just make sure whatever you do not look directly into the sun. Not only did Retro deliver a true Metroid experience in terms of gameplay, but the controls were also almost perfectly implemented. The game features a fairly unique scheme for a first-person game. You actually have no free movement of Samus's arm cannon while you're moving. This was one of my very minor complaints with the original GameCube release, and as you probably guessed by now, I've been playing the Wii version of the game, which has pointer controls with the Wii remote for free aim. The way the original release got around this issue was with the use of the fantastic lock-on system, which can be used on any enemy. It's quick and snappy and gets the job done. The platforming, which has also been a staple of the Metroid series, feels fantastic in Prime. First-person jumping mechanics up until that point were not very well implemented, but in this game it just feels natural. As you're in your descent, your view will tilt ever so slightly downward so you can see exactly where you're going to land. Samus also moves at a fairly brisk pace, which is reminiscent of Super Metroid, although maybe not quite as fast.
With everything that Metroid Prime does right, it's only fitting that the game also has an incredible presentation. The visuals still hold up today, and that music.
The second you start Prime, you're greeted with its outstanding visual presentation with quite possibly the best start menu of all time. Once you get into the game, you find that every single area is incredibly detailed with an atmosphere that I don't think most games achieve. It's an absolutely beautiful game, and Retro's art team has consistently proven they're some of the best bunch of artists out there. It's even evident in non-Nintendo games like Halo 4, which had artists who were formerly working at Retro. The accompanying music in each location fits perfectly as well, from the low chants in Magmoor Caverns to the serene underwater music, as well as what is possibly my favorite video game track of all time in the blissful theme of Phendrana Drifts. I can't forget to mention the sound effects in the game, which are also fantastic, with a ton of ambient noise that adds a lot.
This is how you bring over a game from 2D to 3D. Ocarina of Time was amazing. Super Mario 64 blew our minds, but the level of detail and love that went into Metroid Prime is really unmatched. I'm just lucky enough to have been able to experience this game when it first came out, and to this day, it still stands as my favorite game of all time. For me, it's as close to any game has gotten to perfection. What more needs to be said?
What's up, guys? Sorry it took so long for me to do this second Metroid video. I've been so busy with school and stuff. But anyways, if you liked it, as always, click that like button. It really helps me out. And if you really liked it, subscribe as well. In the annotations below, you can check out my first Metroid Month video. And you can also check out Satchbags' awesome video on Limbo and Immersion, which was a big topic of my Metroid Prime review. So check him out. He's an amazing YouTuber. And yeah, I'll see you guys later.